My professor, Dr. Theodore Rebard, is retiring from the University of St. Thomas. And it's sad news because the University of St. Thomas in Houston is losing a great gem at the university. But it's good news in the sense that I'm glad he's able to retire. He served the school for a very long time in a very well way. And they wrote an article about him, interviewing him, talking about him, and I wanted to read that to you because I thought this was really great stuff. So the headline is Celebrating the Illustrious Dr. Ted Rebard. If you could pick 3 words to describe the soon-to-retire Associate Professor of Philosophy, Ted Rebard, they would be mentor, humble, and dapper. And I could not agree more. I think those are great words to describe him. Me, a mentor? Dr. Rebard says, for 33 years, Rebard taught undergraduate philosophy courses at all levels, from freshman to 4,000 level, with countless students passing through his classroom since 1990. His joy for teaching never waned. Student testimonials count him as one of their favorite professors who significantly influenced their lives. He was their mentor. And I have to admit, myself, I would also agree with this statement because it was probably Dr. Rebard and Sister Teresa Marie were probably the most impactful professors that I've had at the University of St. Thomas. And to see Dr. Rebard go is really sad to me because, I mean, here's another great gem. Dr. Rebard, Gabriel Castillo, he credits Dr. Rebard with putting him on the path that he's on. He gave him a rosary, and he taught him how to pray at adoration, and it's what put Gabe on the path that he's on now, creating his YouTube channel, Gabe After Hours, that now reaches hundreds of thousands of people. I think that's an amazing credit to Dr. Rebard, and there are many, many such cases. Now, he says here, the self-effacing Rebard, unaware of his impact on his students, points to lessons he got from mentors of his own. When it comes to his success at teaching students to think deeply and contemplate an ethical life, he offers, there are maybe 2 sayings and a piece of advice I tell my students. He says, unto what end? I learned this from Father James Schall. In other words, always ask about the ultimate purpose of your actions. And I cannot tell you how useful this has been in my life. Unto what end? That is so important because you look at stories in the news, you look at what people are saying in your life, you look at actions people are taking because you think actions are more important than words, and you say, unto what end? Why are they doing this? What is the ultimate goal of them doing this? Now, unto what end is really in response is a philosophical point trying to say, what is the ultimate purpose of a thing, of something that exists? It's because it's more of a metaphysical thing, but I believe it applies not just to the metaphysical, but also to the concrete. I think that's very important. So then his other point here is, so what? And I love this. We'll bring up something. He's like, so what? And I'm like, okay, well, there we go. He says, that is, what is the real life impact of any question or idea? It is likely unimportant if the question or idea has no such impact. He said, I learned this from Dr. Peter Kreeft. So he actually studied under Dr. Peter Kreeft. And I think that's brilliant as well, because sometimes we ask questions that are just pointless, right? So if we can ask, so what? And if we can come up with a reason, well, then maybe that does have a reason. Not something doesn't need to be ivory tower and useless. It could be ivory tower and useful. It's not necessarily the fact that just because something is intellectual or philosophical or theological that it's unimportant. So that's important to know as well. The last bit of advice he includes here is, I like to remind students that they have only 2 duties in life: to know what is true and to do what is truly good. And I think that is excellent. Absolutely 100%. To know what is true and to do what is truly good. He says, the article says, love of being nobody. Even humble, Rebard seems surprised that he has mentored others. As to impact as a mentor, that is my impact on students, I remain mostly clueless, Rebard says. I hope that one important thing is to focus on testifying to what is true and what is truly good while staying in the background. Personally, about 15 years ago, Father Daniel Cullum gave a talk on the Feast of Our Lady Guadalupe, in which he mentioned San Juan Diego as having the gift of being a nobody. St. Philip Neri's motto was, love to be unknown. Brian Caro, chair of philosophy and director of the Center for Thomistic Studies, sums up Rebard's successful teaching career this way, which is so true. Every time I tell him about another person who tells me how they've been changed by Dr. Rebard, he's always like, "Oh, I had no idea," and he just doesn't know. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. He goes on here. The first ever recipient of the St. Thomas Aquinas Award for Teaching Excellence, Dr. Rebard exemplifies for all of us the orientation of genuine education toward the good of the human person. Dr. Brian Carl, associate professor and chair of philosophy of the Center for Thomistic Studies, says, Dr. Rebard is beloved by our students, many of whom have sought every opportunity to study with him in his final semester through independent studies, including myself. All of us are deeply grateful for Dr. Rebard's life of devotion to truth and his career of exemplary work for the good of our students. Honoring the family tradition. Run into Rebard on campus and you notice the stylish hat perched on his head and his natty appearance in an old-fashioned way. No jeans, shorts, tennis shoes, or t-shirts for this professor. Not surprisingly, this third-generation Californian who grew up in Los Angeles in an urban area comes from a line of haberdashers and tailors. My paternal grandfather was a haberdasher. My maternal grandfather was a bespoke tailor. Rebard offers, my dad and mom passed on their lessons, and I tried to dress in a way my grandfather would approve. And this, too, is something that I think is very important because he's one of the reasons why I started dressing in a more appropriate way, is because of his demonstration, his example. To conclude, he concludes with a story here. He says, I plan to stay in Houston and continue learning. There is a story about Pablo Casals that I love. Casals lived in a very long life, and one day when he was in his 90s, while he was in his studio playing the cello, someone walked in and said, Senor Casals, everyone knows that you are the greatest cellist in the world. Why are you practicing? He looked up and said, I think I'm getting better. Okay, I'm not even in a major league for excellence, but I know I can get better. Amen, amen. So say a prayer for my professor, Dr. Rebard. I'm so grateful for him. I have a student saying a prayer for him. We'll be right back with SatanCon coming up next.